Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Ming Shu. I'm a data scientist with the Government Digital Services Division under GovTech. So this afternoon, my presentation will be about improving government services with data and providing you with some best practices, tips, and insights from the WOGAA platform. So here are the contents for my presentation today. First, I'll give you an introduction about what WOGAA is. I'll cover the importance of usability, going through the digital services KPIs, which were instituted by the Smart Nation Office, as well as giving you some tips on how you can give users and a more enjoyable browsing experience on the web. Finally, I'll close off by sharing some of the initiatives that WOGA has come up with to drive agencies' excellence in digital services. So first and foremost, a bit more about WOGA. So as you can see on this screen, this is actually our Singapore government tech stack. So it comprises a service layer as well as a base layer. So where does WOGA fall under all of this? So in fact, WOGA comes under the analytics portion of the service layer in the tech stack. And what actually is WOGA about? So WOGA is a one-stop analytics platform that provides near real-time monitoring of our digital services, health and performance in a convenient, fast, free, and user-friendly way. So as you can see, this is our product page. We are trying to improve government services with data. So WOGA's suite of products actually comprises 4 main products. So first of all, if we want to know whether the site is available, we can actually tap on WOGA Uptime, which monitors the service availability. Next up, in terms of finding out whether the site is loading fast enough or is accessible, we can actually use WOGA Inspect. Moving on up the hierarchy of needs. So how does the site meet my needs? And this will be using WOGA Analytics. Finally, we also have WOGA Sentiments, which actually collects user ratings and feedback from the citizens themselves. So now I'll touch on usability itself. So what is usability and why is it so important? So first of all, the definition is usability measures the ease at which a user is able to use a product efficiently to achieve a specifically defined goal. So on the internet, usability actually plays an integral role in ensuring a website's content reaches the intended audience. So there are 3 main points about why usability is so important. First of all, in terms of technology dependence. So in fact, right, in Singapore, there's actually a 158.8% mobile penetration rate, which equivalently means that actually on average, everyone has more than 1 mobile phone subscription. So that's why in Singapore, we are actually very heavily dependent on technology. So the second point being aging population. So as you all know, population demographics in Singapore as well as many parts of the world are actually changing. So Singapore is also facing an aging population. So in fact, by the end of 2030, 1 in 4 of our population will be actually above the age of 65. So this is why it is increasingly important that we make sure that our digital services cater to the needs of all age groups, whether it be the young population or the elderly population as well. So the next point is inclusivity. So as Minister Josephine Teo also mentioned in her opening address today, uh, inclusivity is also very important in ensuring that all population demographics, including persons with disabilities, are also able to use our digital services with ease. So what are some of the initiatives that the government has come up with to make sure that these services are actually in tip-top condition for users and citizens? So actually in the end of 2020, the Smart Nation Office actually came up with this set of digital service KPIs. So let me bring you through some of the... So basically the KPIs were instituted to cover various aspects of usability for the government services. And they were announced at the end of 2020 to cover usability in terms of both informational services, which are basically like websites that provide information to the citizens, as well as transactional services, which are those like, for example, if you make a payment on a HDB website. So all these KPIs are actually aligned to the digital service standards. So this digital service standard is actually a set of guidelines to help agencies implement digital services that are easy to use, seamless, and also relevant to citizens and businesses. So in the table below, we actually have the 6 different KPIs that are being monitored for all government digital services. So for informational sites, we actually monitor these aspects. First of all, uptime, which is the availability of the system. There's also the page load time, which is how fast the page actually loads on the website, accessibility, as well as engine optimization. And in terms of transactional services, we monitor two areas, namely customer satisfaction based on the ratings that citizens actually provide on the various government websites, as well as the completion rate of the transaction. But for today's presentation, let me just zoom in on two particular KPIs, which essentially are accessibility as well as SEO. So these are the two most important metrics to evaluate the web experience. So these two metrics are actually monitored using WOGAA's Inspect tool, which uses Google Lighthouse to automate the running of scans on all the pages in the website. So for example, of each website, we actually track the top 5 most visited pages, and we will run these automated scans using Google Lighthouse, which will generate a score to tell you how the website is performing. So in terms of the KPI itself, actually based on last year's financial year report, we found out that actually in terms of accessibility, right, 49% of the websites met this KPI. So this KPI is actually based on Google industry standards. So for accessibility and SEO, you have to achieve a score of 90 to be considered as pass. So in this case, 49% of our websites actually met the KPI for accessibility. And correspondingly for SEO, there were actually 32% of these government websites that met the KPI for SEO. So now let me show you some of these tips to give users a more enjoyable experience browsing on the web. So I'll be covering in terms of making websites accessible to all, as well as optimizing your search experience. So web accessibility actually means that websites are designed and developed for everyone. So for example, some people may actually use things like screen readers, external keyboards, or emulated keyboards to navigate your website. And interactive elements should actually be reachable by the keyboard so that there's a clear indicator when the element that you're actually trying to focus on is can be visible. So in terms of WOGA Inspect, right, we actually monitored these areas, and we found out that based on all the government websites last year, right, these are the top 5 areas of concern. So for example, in the graph, you can see that color contrast is the most failed check. So 55% of websites on Singapore government's portals actually failed the accessibility check for color contrast. And correspondingly for link name, there was about 38%, and so on and so forth. So this is based on the scan results for March this year. So because of that, how are we able to alleviate these problems? So for the next few slides, I'll show you some recommendations in terms of how you can improve things like color contrast and so on. So first of all, for color contrast, this check actually observes whether there's sufficient contrast ratio between the background and foreground colors. So color actually plays an important role for your website's accessibility. So when you design text-heavy pages, you must ensure that the foreground text has sufficient contrast with the background colors. And low contrast text actually makes it difficult or impossible for many users to read. So also using color is a common way of indicating the status of an element. But for colorblind users, they may not be able to tell like what is red or green, right? So in this case, right, you actually have to use symbols to make it more prominent. So for example, if you look at the screenshot, right, for example, on the top, there's actually a validation without a symbol. So this makes it unclear for the users whether there's actually any problem. So the recommendation is to actually add a symbol. So in the second screenshot, you can actually see that by adding an additional symbol on the right-hand side, which is an exclamation point, right, it actually shows the error that the user is facing more clearly. So one of the online tools that you can actually use for color contrast is this Web AIM's contrast checker. And this will actually also help you to check your contrast ratio of the page. So the second component is a link name. So all these link tags are essential components that actually help the users to navigate and interact with the web content using things like screen readers. So all these link tags should make sense on its own without actually referring to the surrounding context. So for example, again, bringing your attention to the screenshot. So in there you see that the first link actually shows just a download here. So this is not very clear for the users. Whereas what you can actually do, right, is to specify what the user is actually downloading. So in this case, it will be download 2011 research report. So in this case, for those who are using screen readers, right, immediately they will know that this is a 2011 research report. And the next one is a heading order. So properly ordered headings help users to navigate when using assistive technologies. So if the heading is descriptive, users can hear an outline of the page main ideas and decide for themselves like whether they are which parts they want to read. So in this case, you can see the screenshot actually shows DSTA's homepage. So they have actually used proper headings to differentiate the different sections of the page. In terms of optimizing search experience, similarly, we have used WOGAA Inspect to identify which are the areas of concern for most of the government websites. So in this case, there are a few things. For example, the meta description, which verifies that the document has a meta description and can be included in search results to summarize the page content. Another thing is crawlable anchors. So this verifies that the links are not crawlable, and search engines may use the href attribute to crawl the websites and discover more pages. So with that in mind, what are some of the initiatives that our WOGAA product has actually come up with to help agencies improve their digital services? So I'll be going through two of them. So the first of which is the digital service dashboard. So in fact, right now, if you go to the WOGAA website, right, and log in, the first thing you'll see is this dashboard, which actually gives you a brief overview of the whole of government digital service landscape. So for example, how many agencies there are, how many informational services and transactional services there are, followed by the key metrics that I was talking about in terms of the KPIs. So for example, like in terms of uptime, how many sites have passed, page load time, how many sites have passed. So this agency level view allows people to derive more insights on what digital services are performing. The other initiative is actually the Digital Service Award. So this was in order to provide more positive reinforcement to motivate public officers to improve their digital services. The inaugural awards was actually conducted last year in December to recognize agencies who have exemplified excellence in operating our government services. So all our award categories were also based on the KPIs that have been tracked on WOGAA. So in fact, right, in the months leading up to the awards last year, we saw that agencies actually stepped up their game significantly. So for example, right, in the 2 months from October to December, we could see that, for instance, like in terms of accessibility, 51% of about 100 eligible agencies actually improved their accessibility scores in leading up to the award ceremony. So I would like to end off with a quote from Steve Jobs. So actually, if a user is having a problem, it's our problem. So this means that usability is really a shared responsibility among all stakeholders of a product. And good usability ensures that the digital service is able to deliver its intended outcome to the users of all demographics. So in fact, all the things that I've shared earlier can be found in this WOGAA Insights report, which can be downloaded from our WOGAA platform. And as well as you can also drop us an email, support@wogaa.gov.sg, to give us any feedback or suggestions, and join our community at Workplace for more event and product updates. So yeah, thank you.